Hello again. Today we're going to Chernobyl. You probably all know what Gamma is by this point, but if you don't, it's essentially all of the Stalker games bodged together and turned into an incredible open-world FPS that'll pick you up by the taint, slip a dig in dry right to the third knuckle, twirl it around a bit, and then send you on your way with a spank. And for some reason, you'll keep coming back. I've never played it to the late game, but today that changes. I want to get dripped out in some sick suit that I've stapled extra-dimensional anomalies to, play with Giga Chad tactical guns, and go and lick the elephant's foot. But we can't do that right now. We're in the Stalker creche for wee babies. Cordon, literally in the rookie village, with a Toz. You can play as basically anyone in Gamma, but we're joining what I would call the default option, the loners. No matter who you join though, most of your time will be spent doing odd jobs for other stalkers in the zone. This is because you need a few things, and one is money. When you do work for someone, you get money. If you do work for someone and don't get money, then that's either a favour or slavery. I'm sure there's a legal distinction in there somewhere, but basically the same thing to me. Anyway, you also quite often get given the location of a stash. Stashes are an absolutely integral part of the game, with a great many of the things we need to progress being found inside of them. I'll tell you what most of those things are a little later on. But first things first, we'll leave the rookie village and then, that thing that I told you about earlier, down to the third knuckle, remember? It happens straight away. Some military guys just sort of crest a hill and gun me down like a horse that's broken its leg at the Grand National. In Gamma, you do a lot of loading your last quick save. It's just a part of the game for 99% of players. The first task that I actually completed was to kill some mutant dogs. Some poor stalker already dealt with most of the pack before keeling over dead, which you might think is a bad thing. That's my faction after all, but no, this is just bonus loot. So I cut up all of his clothes and field strip his gun for any of the good bits. You never know, later on I might want some of them. You might ask why not just take his PP itself? Well, because the most important part of it, the barrel, is completely fucked. And you can't just repair or replace that without some basic tools. I also cut up all of the dogs. Mutant bits aren't usually particularly valuable, but they're common requests from fellow stalkers. And also you can cook them. I mean, I wouldn't eat them personally, but you can do that. For finishing off a pack of mutant dogs, Wolf here gives me 5 Gs and the location of a stash in Dark Valley. We'll check that out eventually, but as you can see, it's a white stash, the lowest tier. These don't usually contain much of note, so you want to let them build up and grab them in bulk, really. I have a few tasks in the swamps now, one of which, the yellow one, is a story quest, which just means that it's not randomly generated like all of the rest of them. On my way there, I failed to dodge a boar, deliberately, before putting it down, so that I have a chance to demonstrate healing. Deliberately. Definitely. Down here in the bottom left, we find a little piece of stolen Tarkov UI, which shows health bars for each of your limbs. First, we'll use a bandage to fill our leg's health bar in yellow, that's first aid, and then we'll knock back a few ibuprofen to post-heal the wounds. And also accidentally open the console because the tendons in my hands have gone stiff from rock climbing, but hey, I can lift 70 kilograms on a 20mm edge, so that's probably worth it, right? Anyway, you have to post-heal wounds because whilst first aid will let you function normally, it'll degrade over time, putting you back where you started, but with less meds. The downside is that most post-healing drugs have some kind of side effect. Ibuprofen isn't so bad compared to Yagilin or Fent, both of which we'll take in pretty massive quantities throughout this playthrough. Just after that, we level up Endurance to level 1, because you start from 0 around these parts. There are 5 skills, and I'll show you them later once I figure out that there's actually a menu to see them all in, and they level up pretty slowly, providing small benefits that eventually stack up to be pretty good. As you can see down there, it says we gained some movement speed and our stamina consumption has improved. Very good. So, into the swamps, where after scavenging some random garbage from ruined buildings, we make our way to the church where Kovalev the Science Man is hanging out. Unfortunately, he's hanging out with a load of renegades, so I have to kill them first. After looting though, I find the body of a clear sky stalker that they presumably just killed, and he's got a pretty busted AUG. I'm probably not going to use it all that much since its barrel isn't in great shape, but it's worth carrying around just to add a little range to our arsenal. Kovalev gives us a quest to find some anomalous dirt from various local anomalies, which is a simple enough task, but I won't be getting around to it for quite some time, because instead I'll continue to run around the swamps, scooping up any random trash I can find, and amassing tasks from the clear sky stalkers that live here. From a stash I picked up a working TT-33, and then ran into some bandits to find out the hard way that it wasn't loaded. Thankfully I had just saved, so I got to try this again. A few times. Look, the AI can see through bushes and I can't. It's not fair. It's Tarkov scavs all over again. So if combat is the entree, then Yadulin is the dessert. Let's get a few of them down us and wobblily carry on looting. Oh, who's this? A tasty little SVD. It's very beat up, but I am absolutely taking that with me. My excitement at finding an SVD was justified a little later on when, after killing a load more renegades as part of a reverse bounty hunt task, I found that one of them also has an SVD. It's also very busted, but the important part is that it's busted differently, meaning I can mash them together to make one slightly less busted SVD. Crucially, the barrel of this one is in much better shape, which has a massive effect on damage and armor penetration, both of which are quite important stats for a gun. By this point though, I'm in pretty rough shape and have a good few tasks to turn in, so we're off back to Cordon, through a load of snorks. Weird looking things. I've met some guys dressed like this before in the basement of a German club, but I probably can't talk about that on YouTube. And then we also run into the military. Come to think of it, they were in that basement too. That night had a very different outcome though. Just as they did earlier, they gunned me down. I'll get my revenge on those guys later. You just wait, it's very satisfying, I assure you. At least I got a strength level along the way, which increases my carry weight. A very important stat for a hoarder such as myself. I managed to give those nasty soldiers the slip with the help of some gamer subs, who aren't a sponsor and never have been, but this would have been a pretty amazing segue if they were, wouldn't it? Anyway, just like with the 400mg caffeine hit from a pre-workout called something like Inner Alpha Demon Giga Sigma Grind Juice, there came a crash. It was my body crashing into the Teravolt anomaly. This kills the Stalker. On my way back through Cordon, in a suspiciously blue tunnel, I picked up a tapeworm. Sorry, I mean another tapeworm. Little Paul's been in my tum-tum the whole time, of course. The new tapeworm is an artifact, which you can wear on your belt alongside mutant hides and other equipment. They grant various benefits and usually drawbacks. This one gives a chance to stun mutants when they hit you in melee, which is useful, but really you don't want to be getting hit at all. Anyway, it's time to start gunsmithing, so I need to head north a little bit to a farm where a technician and his workbench lives. On the way there, I grab a Snork's hand from a bandit's pockets. I don't really want to think about what he was using it for. His friend, though, had a Papasha in really good condition. Which is nice, but I'm going to be honest, I'll use it a grand total of once or, okay, maybe twice to kill some bandits. Then I'll buy a perfect condition locking mechanism for the SVD before heading out for more bandit slaying. For which, I got the location of my first yellow stash. It's rather conveniently located in the back of Cordon's military checkpoint, which is swarming with angry men who have mummy issues and fancy guns. First, I tried running at them head-on in the dark. Didn't work. So I hung around the farm for a while, eventually getting a solid 11 hours of sleep through an emission. Then in the morning, after storing my heavy crap in a little metal box and buying a new trigger mechanism for the SVD, I threw my fragile young body at the checkpoint over and over and over again in the harsh light of day. Eventually convincing myself that I had been stiffed out of my first good stash by the cruel, evil game, before realizing that there was another way. A fallen tree gave me a convenient spot to jump the fence, and then a stack of conveniently placed trash against the checkpoint walls let me sneak my way in like a little weasel, right under the noses of the apparently highly trained military personnel, with mummy issues, that have been shooting me to death through dense vegetation for the last 20 minutes. Inside the stash I find some very busted armors, guns, a few plastic bottles, a fire starter, a file, and a drug-making kit. Well, it's not exactly what I was after, but a drug-making kit is actually very useful. If you know what to loot, you can save yourself a lot of rubles with it. But really, I'm after basic tools. I'll explain why whilst I run from the idiot soldiers. With mummy issues. In Gamma, there are 3 tiers of tools: Basic, Advanced, and Expert. Each set essentially lets you work on the next tier of equipment, replacing parts, including the barrels, of bigger and better guns, as well as letting you craft the more advanced repair kits required to work on light, medium, and heavy armors. Sorry, I don't mean to make this some kind of tutorial, but there's a lot of complex systems thrown into this mod pack, so I don't just want to skip over them either. Anyway, let's get back to doing odd jobs for every stalker in the zone. Really though, I actually did spend the next few hours doing this, so I'm not going to cover every single task I completed. Let's instead just talk about the highlights. I stole a really good condition Vityaz from the body of a bandit, and I'll be using this thing for a long time. I love the Vityaz. Hell, I own one. It's airsoft, but real steel and very satisfying to use. And aside from me just liking it a lot, it's a great early game option in Gamma. You don't need crazy armor penetration yet, and it's easy to hoard a load of 9x19 ammo. I started working on the scientist's task too, hunting for that anomalous dirt. First attempt didn't go well. Might have slightly misunderstood how the lightning anomalies work. I did manage to get my quarry second time around though, despite accumulating a lot of radiation. But nothing a bottle of vodka can't resolve. Since I'm tasking so much, I'm also getting quite a lot of stashes. And in this one I found a suit upgrade kit. There are 3 levels of upgrade kit, and this is the highest. Well worth hoarding these. The same kits exist for weapons too, they're very good. I get the 2nd and 3rd anomalous dirt chunks, get absolutely dunked on by a bandit who recently joined FaZe Clan, but like if it was 2012 and that was still a good thing. And for giving Kovalev the artifacts, he gives us some cash, the location of a yellow stash, and a titanium grid, which goes in a belt slot like an artifact, granting a nice increase to carry weight at the cost of electrical resistance. I headed right over to the yellow stash and found within some gunsmithing tools, which are primarily used for crafting ammo. Something that I wait far too long to start doing in this playthrough, but don't worry, I do get there in the end. After heading back to Sidorovich and slotting a new trigger mechanism into my PP, it now has entirely green parts, so I'll start using it in place of the SVD, because as nice as that is, it needs the barrel fixed up to really meet its potential. After all of that, I've got 18,000 rubles. I did have a lot more, but I spent 26 grand on food, ammo and meds. So back to tasking. Seriously, this is a major part of the game. You do a lot of busy work, and for some reason science hasn't yet fully divined, you really enjoy it. At least I do. I even took a task from a guy that I didn't realise was military, only to be gunned down by him as I left the building. Second time around, he got what was coming to him. I continued to become stronger, reaching strength level 4 before being jump-scared by a bloodsucker, which somehow didn't even hurt me. I guess being shot in the gut with a TOS will somewhat disrupt your attack plans. I keep seeing a message popping up from Anonymous about a package in the swamps, and giving me an RF frequency to search on. I have an RF receiver, and I'm in the Great Swamps, so alright, I'll bite. After quite a bit of running around, the receiver starts to beep, and I get to play a game of Warmer Colder with the stash. It leads me to a pair of bandits, neither of which have a stash hidden inside of them. Eventually I found it in a barrel. You don't open it like a container, you just pick it up and get told what it contained, which in this case was an assortment of ammo and then as hidden loot, an IRP combat ration and a ball, which is an artifact, not like a dog toy or something. It's quite an interesting artifact actually. It lets you kick certain mutants to death depending on how many balls you have. Allow me to demonstrate. After coming under fire from some bandits through thick vegetation, I performed a tactical rearwards advance to some cover, in order to lure them out from the brush to be shot. But whilst handling them, some dogs arrived, and not having the time to deal with them in the proper fashion, I just kicked them like Jack Black in Anchorman. Later on, I did the same thing to some more. They call me Dog Kicker. Wait, that's not a great thing to be known for, actually. Don't call me that. I hit Endurance 4 and head into the Clear Sky base that's tucked away in the southwest here to pick up some more tasks and supplies, including Type A, C, and D weapon repair kits, which are expensive but seem well worth getting. I also completed a task here for the local doctor. He asked me to get him 6 Vinca, a handy drug that post-heals the torso. Currently I have 0, but he sells it, so I bought 10 from him for 6,000 rubles, gave him the 6 that he wants, for which he rewards me 12,000 rubles. I suspect the good doctor might have been abusing his supply if this interaction seemed reasonable to him, but I'm not going to argue. I even did one of Clear Sky's major quests while I was in the area. They just needed me to go and grab a thing from an anomaly field, and they gave me a load of money and meds for it. But I'm not going to dedicate myself to Clear Sky. Those guys are lame. They don't even want to get rich. We are not consumed by a quest for money. Okay, nerds, I am. So I'm in the swamps and I'm going to keep doing a load of random shit. And in the process, I find an absolutely mashed DVL, which I would love to use because it does insane amounts of damage, but I probably won't ever get to because parts and ammo are really quite scarce. This SV98, though, on the other hand, is much more reasonable. 7.62x54 ammo and parts that will fit it are found much more often. Its barrel is pretty ruined, which will gimp its damage output, but it'll still outdo the PP at anything more than 30 meters, so I figured it was worth spending 2 of my upgrade kits on to give it an adjustable zoom scope. Very nice. And then we're hit with an emission. I wasn't expecting that, so I guess lucky me for being indoors at the time. The other stalkers on the radio will usually give you some advanced warning if you're paying attention, but I rarely am. I kind of just ignored the emission and carried on futzing around in the little stash I've been setting up here at the farm. Emissions are pretty cool looking, so I'll sit and stare at the next one, I promise. Once the weather and the interdimensional waves of death have cleared up, I go back to my very important work: killing bandits and shooting up Fent. I'm headed up north for a little bit now because I have some stashes dotted around in the meadow, Dark Valley, and Garbage. My welcome party is a trio of piggies camping the spawn. I killed them all first try, of course. Yeah, first try. After that, I made it to a campfire where I played Ring Around the Roses with some pseudo-dogs, and then on the way to my garbage stash, that is, a stash in garbage, not a garbage stash. Anyway, I got strength level 5. The stash itself had some psychic drugs in it. These are important, but not necessarily rare or expensive, so I guess it was a garbage stash in garbage. Anyway, for now we sleepily march back to the farm for, you guessed it, a sleep. But you can't do that whilst you're irradiated, so I have to drink a beer first. I hear you sleep better after alcohol anyway. And then it's straight back to tasking, because money is required. Stalker need that bread. During the tasking I get shafted with another drug-making kit from a yellow stash. You hate to see it, but it is what it is. And I ended up hiding at the Clear Sky base during another emission, so, as I promised, here you go, I'll peep the horrors. Look at the pretty flashing lights. Does that activate your neurons? Anyway, my biggest problem right now is desperately trying to maintain a decent ruble balance. My skills are leveling up, I've even finally got a survival level, which gives some resistances and improves your mutant harvests, but I'm still just sitting on a pathetic bank balance. And I don't yet know how to resolve that, so I just keep on tasking. I'm even getting pretty good at it. Turns out if you spend a few hours playing an FPS, your old chops start to come back. Getting attacked by dogs in the swamp sort of feels like a high-stakes aim trainer. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually solve any of my problems, it just drains my supply of medicine and ammo. The experienced among you will know a couple of ways that I'm being dumb and wasting money, and you know what? As I write this after the playthrough, so do I. I just spaffed almost 17,000 rubles up the walls buying more supplies. But on the upside, after its long service, the TOS is finally being replaced. With a different TOS. A pump-action one. It's pretty beat up, like everything I find. But being able to pump shot out faster than its bolt-action cousin is enough to overcome this. And you know what? After absolutely ragdolling a group of bandits on the road north, I reckon it's time for the PP to get a reward for good behaviour. So I bought a suppressor and red dot for it. Look at it. Listen to it. Oh, that's nice. We're headed into Darkscape for a yellow stash now. This is a very large zone, and that's why they give you the tutorial for vehicles, because those are a thing in Gamma now. If you play the game, under no circumstances should you fall for this trap. Getting into a vehicle in Gamma is functionally identical to putting your own pee-pee in your mouth and pulling the trigger, if you know what I mean. So anyway, I get to the stash on foot, and my reward lies within. Sound the alarms. We have basic tools. The future is now, old man. I'll put them to good use later, but for now I continue to get stronger. And apparently, whilst killing bandits, my reputation improved. I think that this affects trade prices and available stock with certain factions. Something like that, but I'm going to be honest, Gamma isn't exactly well documented, and when you Google things, you'll read a lot of people saying, like I just did, that they think a system works in a particular way. It's kind of part of the game's charm. No one really seems to know exactly how everything works. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. We got rep, who cares what it does? With tools, I need to start buying survival guides from technicians to expand my crafting options. Starting with the one that unlocks backpacks, because that's obviously my most important piece of gear. I mentioned equipment upgrades earlier, but now it's time to actually use one. My trusty gas mask is getting a buff to stamina recovery. Some gear, like this mask, only has a couple of options to choose from, whereas most suits will have multiple categories of upgrades ranging from utility stuff like carry weight and stamina regen, to the more obvious resistance upgrades. Alright, we're going to head north to Garbage again, but not just to grab some stashes this time. Instead, to check out the settlement there and meet the weirdo hunter guy that, I think, runs it? I don't know. On the way there, I found a Dragon's Eye artifact, which gives my shots a 5% chance to explode, which is demonstrated fairly immediately on a pair of lurkers at melee range. Most would consider that a drawback, I guess, but it's all in good fun. Right, the weirdo here named Butcher has a thing for mutants and will consistently give you hunting tasks that pay reasonably well and are usually very easy. Like this one. I literally stepped out of the gate and shot a single cat for 6,000 rubles. Easy game. My previous Gamma playthroughs have all featured long stints in Garbage working for this guy and collecting a huge stash of mutant bits in the process. But we're not hanging around today. Instead, we're moving straight on to Agroprom. Kovalev told me to head over here to get his laptop. And also there's another of those RF stashes waiting for me. This one took me a long time to find, but it was well worth it since it contained types A, B, and D weapon cleaning kits. Could have saved a lot of money buying those earlier. Oh well, now we've got spares. The laptop then. It's inside of an anomaly called the Nerve Racker, so logic dictates that we'll be dealing with psychic damage. So it's time to take some drugs. Banging back enough pills to take out an average British raver and then following it up with a jazz ciggy lands us at just over 20% psi resistance. Not actually that much. Not enough for me to be able to take my time in there. Unfortunately then, the place not only drains your psi health, that little bar above your normal health bars, but it's also full of lightning anomalies, which don't exactly gel with the idea of rushing. Thankfully, being able to time travel has its benefits. So after a couple of agonizing deaths, I now know the correct path to sprint along, grab the laptop, and retrace on the way out. That's just one part of the quest though. I also have to grab 3 more anomalous samples for Kovalev, which is a little bit problematic due to how insanely radioactive Agroprom is. But I persist, getting only slightly minced by the dog mincer and escaping the bedrock claw without a scratch. The radiation is less of a problem than I had initially expected on account of the 35 bottles of vodka in my inventory. It's still a pain in the ass though, because it means I can't sleep. No matter how many anti-radiation cigarettes I smoke, you can't sleep whilst being actively irradiated. So I have to go and face the last anomaly for Kovalev whilst sleepy. In the dark and surrounded by mutants. Lots of them actually, a really shocking number of fractures, helped out by a few dogs. They tried to do me in, but thanks to my friend Pumpy and his explosive shot, I handled it. I actually think the explosion did far more harm than good here, but still, it looked cool. So, I'm very irradiated, in rough shape, and I'm out of meds, water, and food. But I got the last sample from the Bushwhacker anomaly, so now I can sprint my ass back through the swamp to Kovalev, who rewards me for my troubles with a body cooler, some cash, and a stash location, and tells me to go to Yantar to do more research. The body cooler is interesting. It's not, as you might think by the name, somewhere to stash corpses to keep them from going rotten. It goes on your belt and gives health regen and bleeding control, which would save you a lot of meds, but this comes with pretty massive debuffs to stamina recovery and radiation resistance, so I'm probably not going to be using it anytime soon. Now to crawl back to Babytown and spend all of my rubles on resupply. The main thing from preventing me heading further north right now is, as we discovered in Agroprom, radiation. I need a properly protective suit, which is why I'm collecting random medium armors whenever I see them. You can convert a suit to your own faction by talking to, in our case as a loner, Sidorovich, for a fee of course. But that's irrelevant, because to repair anything decent, I'd need advanced tools. I did at least manage to throw a bigger backpack together, and bought the survival guide that teaches me to make the next ones, only to discover that I will also need advanced tools for them. So that's the next major goal. Advanced tools. I'll be aggressively tasking and checking stashes for the next few hours in service of that goal, while trying to move north bit by bit, as the chance to get advanced tools is higher in the more northerly areas. I also, at this point, start to actively hunt for artifacts. I'm not sure why it took me so long, but I randomly found this Night Star, which gives some radiation and explosive resistance, as well as some carry weight for a small burn res drawback. Nice. A little later on, in Garbage, where I have a yellow stash, I picked up a soul artifact from the Witch's Cauldron, which grants a little bit of health regen and even more radiation resistance. It's a very slow regen, but it's better than nothing. Like I said earlier about the body cooler, in the long run it saves you a lot of medicine, which are one of the biggest expenses for a young stalker. Unfortunately, my yellow stash here contained yet another drug-making kit. So I grabbed a better knife from Butcher that will let me get better conditioned mutant hides, and then got on my way north to Rostock, where Duty live. They're kind of the organised military faction here that isn't actually the military. In other words, they wear red instead of blue, and perhaps more importantly, they don't shoot me on sight. There's also a whole lot of their foot soldiers here to grab tasks from, and that's going to be the order of the day. Conveniently, the doctor here actually wanted a drug-making kit, so that yellow stash in Garbage wasn't so bad after all. I was able to use my newfound crafting knowledge to put a light armor kit together, which not only lets me maintain my armor, but it also lets me use upgrades on it. So I gave my suit an extra belt slot before patching it up a bit. With that sorted and a PDA full of tasks, we head west into wild territory, and immediately come under fire from a load of mercenaries in a sniper's nest. Whilst making my way closer, taking some pot shots as I go, I get, to put it bluntly, fucked up. So instead of wasting valuable medicine, I just heal up my wounded arms and then go take a dump, letting my artifacts heal my main health bar back up. Now you're thinking with portals. Never mind. Anyway, on what was definitely not my first try, I managed to pick off the mercs and get in there to claim my loot, only to die to radiation. Second time around, I did my looting much faster, so after grabbing a stash from underneath this little house just out front of the sniper's nest, we're now very overloaded. But I was in a hurry and everything looked so good, so I just took it all. One of the highlights is this gas mask, which, being light armor, we can actually repair. But even in its current busted state, it beats out our OG mask in almost every single metric. It does absolutely ruin our vision, but that's just the price you pay. After this ordeal, I apparently slept for 17 hours with the drunk Rostock technician watching me the whole time, and then headed out north, this time to the army warehouses, intending to circle around to Yantar, where, from another merc, I looted a S.T.A.L.K.E.R scout. A neat gun indeed, and with a near-perfect barrel. Quickly I run through to Dead City, where I'm absolutely swarmed by yet more mercs, but I manage to slip by, on my first try, obviously. Only to find that I absolutely cannot make it to Yantar this way, as I get dumped directly into an area of immediate brain melting. So, I guess we're going via wild territory then. I made a hilarious dash through the area with the help of an energy drink, only stopping to murder and loot 2 mercenaries on the way. Alrighty then, Yantar, where the ecologist's base is, and where our new artifact quest giver, Markov, lives. Just like Kovalev before him, he'll give us a couple of artifact hunting quests, and that's great, we'll do those soon enough, but first I've looted a lot of useful stuff, and all of my repair kits and whatnot are back south in Cordon. So I need to cart a load of this loot back down there to sort through and repair what I can. After a long run back then, our mask can be repaired. Obviously this gives us nicely improved resistances, up to 21% radiation now, but more importantly, it cleared our vision. I also crafted some ammo for the S.T.A.L.K.E.R, finally starting to learn that ammo crafting is a very good idea. See, I've been running tasks and looting stashes for about 20 hours now, maybe a bit more actually, and it might not always feel like it, but there is progression happening under the surface. For one, our skills are rising, letting us carry more loot, run faster and further, and whatever other things the skill levels do. Our gear and our ability to repair it is also steadily getting better, which means our base resistances are rising, letting us safely venture further north for better loot. You really do have to take the occasional zoomed out view in Gamma to see how all of the little incremental gains are adding up. On top of that, I'm actually starting to get good again. I don't do much FPS gaming these days, so it takes about this long for me to get back into the swing of things. All that said, I am just going back to tasking now. I realised that I can craft 5 basic tools into an advanced set, so if I get really desperate, that's my plan. I did also pick up what is essentially the game's main quest, following the trail of Strelok, the player character in Shadow of Chernobyl and major character in the other games. Basically, an old man tells you where to find his goon cave in Agroprom, so we'll check that out later. 3 vaguely interesting things happen in sequence now, only 2 of which are good. 1, I killed a mutant who obviously learned to run Serpentine in the OG DayZ mod, and then cut a gas stove out of his stomach. That's interesting, but I won't complain. 2, I accidentally yeeted a grenade in the middle of Rostock, which thankfully they were okay with. And then 3, most importantly of all, I finally realised that I can disassemble unwanted ammo to much more reliably craft the varieties I need. After turning in a few more tasks for the many stalkers of Agroprom, I'm going to go find that goon cave. I'm going to have to compete with some bandits for it though. I'm not sure why, but I wasn't expecting there to be people down here. Sure would have been a good time to have a grenade, but nonetheless the PP gets the job done. One of them has a busted up bubble helmet, and a busted up bubble butt too, which I'll take with me as a future project, before moving on to the second course. Zombies and bloodsuckers, one of whom kindly donates its hide. It's pretty nice. It stops bleeding, increases stamina recovery, and gives rupture resistance. A little more crawling through the tunnels and eating canned corn later, we find Strelok's hideout, which sadly is more of a library than a goon cave. Lots of military documents and journals in here, one of which leads us to Rostock. Back up on the surface, it's time to go and do something that's been coming for a very long time. Remember like 20 minutes ago now when I said I'd get revenge on the military? Well, it just so happens they have a base here in Agroprom, and I've suddenly got a lot of ammo to waste. I spent 10 minutes or so picking off the dudes at the gateway from afar with the scout before taking things a little closer with my PP. And I only got killed by a grenade once. I got killed by bullets a lot more times, but only by grenade once. Anyway, this wasn't entirely driven by a desire for revenge and looting. I do also have a task to gather 10 military patches, but it was mainly the revenge and looting. My inventory swells with rubles, ammo, gun and armor parts, and then I get this crazy bling AK-74U. It's busted as hell, but I'm absolutely taking it to fix up later. It's got a thermal sight on it and everything. Oh, also I had a yellow stash in this base that somebody asked me to retrieve something from. That's the actual reason I did all of that, to finally clear the flashing marker off of my map. But that's not all. I have another yellow stash just outside the base, presumably from a PDA that I found on a body or something, and within I find more basic tools. Now, as I said earlier, I could use 5 of these to make advanced tools, but I can also hand them into technicians to upgrade their stock. So that's what I'll be doing. Just as soon as I've made it back to Babytown with my 107 kilograms of loot, Stalker must be caked to the high heavens the way I hoard. I'm also carrying about 70,000 rubles now. Those guys dropped a lot of just raw cash. It's very good. Back in Cordon, I gave Xeno at the farm my spare tools, and presumably then once he restocks, he'll have some shiny new stuff. We'll see. Then, whilst visiting Sid again, a shiny new knife caught my eye. It cost me 18,000 rubles, but having seen how good some mutant hides can be, I want them to be in as good condition as possible, so I think it's a worthwhile investment. I spent a minute playing with an anomalous corpse in a tunnel, and then sure enough, Xeno has restocked, and now sells light armor and Type B weapon repair kits, as well as just generally having more of everything else. Whilst poking around my stashes here, I figure that maybe it's time to pump a load more upgrades into my suit and mask. I had been thinking of saving them for whatever suit comes next, but I don't know how long that's going to take to manifest, so whatever. Wound healing, which means bleeding by the way, and an additional 10 kilograms of weight capacity yet added to my suit. I also rewarded the PP for good service with better recoil and accuracy. So with my loot dumped and kit upgraded, it's back out on the road we go. Straight into an emission that I wasn't prepared for. But there's some shelter nearby, so it's fine, and in fact, it even caused a random military dude to run directly into the muzzle of my PP. Sorry bud, spot's taken. In case you're curious how my skills are progressing, I just hit strength 11. I think that they max at 30, so, you know, we're getting up there. I'm just kind of doing another big stash run before going back north. And whilst doing that, some kind renegades gave me the opportunity to confirm that yes, I will indeed stop bleeding quite quickly now. That's great. I don't necessarily need to bandage in combat anymore, but I will still be using plenty of the things because they're just really great first aid for the limbs and torso. Moving through Darkscape, still just scooping up stashes, none of which have anything particularly good in them, I meet my first controller. When I was a kid, these guys legitimately terrified me. The idea of an enemy just grabbing your camera like that creates such a strong sense of powerlessness. One of the greatest video game enemies of all time, in my opinion. Anyway, it killed me. And then when I reloaded, I had to just immediately sprint to shelter because another emission was coming. Having survived which, I immediately died to another controller. The next go around, I was able to get some free shots at him whilst he was behaving all Sasquatch style. And then, whilst just trying to slip through Dark Valley, I get absolutely mulched by a pseudo-giant. Well then, that isn't ideal. Next time around, I managed to get by unmulched, and wind up getting ganked by boars waiting for me at the zone transition like goons in the nearest low-sec system to Jita 4-4. But unlike back in the golden era of EVE Online though, I can just reload a save and go a different way around, finding what may or may not be the same group of boars and engaging them on my own terms. I took one of their hides at a tasty 82% condition thanks to my new knife, which gives really high burn resistance and a good weight carried buff too. Next, I find an interesting artifact that'll upgrade another artifact. The wisest among you would probably say I should save this for something particularly special, but I'm just not that kind of beast, so I immediately use it on my soul, the artifact, not my actual soul, don't have one, and that upgrades it to a collarbok. It's essentially just a better version of the same thing, but now with the additional downside of some negative ballistic resistance. That's not ideal, but it's probably worth it for the increased regen and radiation resistance. Whilst tasking around in Yantar, I realised that the head of science in Science Town sells something called an artifact melter, which lets you do all sorts of artifact crafting. We won't use it much for a while, but it's pretty much a mandatory item, so I bought it. I also found a Gucci M4 and an exosuit in a stash. The M4 needs work, but it should be simple enough to get into working condition, unlike the exosuit, which I'll happily take and throw into a stash somewhere for later, but I am extremely unlikely to be able to use anytime soon. I was focusing on doing quests for the scientists because they pay pretty well and it helps to build up a load of artifacts, but naturally, before too long I ended up fat with loot, so decided to head through wild territory to Rostock where it can be stashed. But speaking of stashes, on the way through, I opened one up to find something wonderful. Advanced tools, baby! We just advanced to the medium age. because back in Rostock, the first thing I do is craft a medium armor toolkit, because that will let me work on the good assault rifles and lower caliber snipers. Whilst there, Strelok's journal pointed us here, so I spoke to the local barkeep and he told us that we missed him by a day, and that he was heading further north, saying we should speak to the gatekeeper. A fellow who, keeps the gate. He stands guard at the gateway to the north, repelling the constant stream of monolith weirdos. The next order of business then is to take this mercenary Siva suit all the way down south to Sid to have it switched out for the loner version. I put a nice lightweight loadout together so this wasn't such a slog, but did include my new shiny M4 in that. And let me tell you, after hours of using 9mm, 5.56 really hits different. Down in Cordon, I slip Sid 15 grand and he gives us our nice loner branded Siva suit, which is basically better in every way than my light suit, aside from the fact that I lose some movement speed. That is worthwhile though for the massively improved resistances. I'm sure I picked up a medium helmet at some point too to replace this mask, but I have no idea where I put it, so whatever. I blasted a load of upgrades into the new suit and then grabbed the crafting recipes for the first and second tiers of gun and armor upgrade kits so that I could make more of my own. Because why not? That sentence might run on a bit further than it needs to, but no one cares at this point. It's too far into the video for anyone to care. I'm on the second monitor. They can't hear me. Now though I need to refill my ruble balance, which means heading back up north. There are quite a few things I need to get done up here, starting with running through Rostock, picking up basically every single task that anyone would give me, and then moving on to the army warehouses, where in the Freedom base, the trader gave me a cool 20 grand for some sleeping pills, and then told me that the reason they needed them was due to some special bloodsuckers nearby keeping everyone awake. On the way out to deal with them, I found some more advanced tools, because I guess when it rains it pours. This is fine, I'll give them to a technician to upgrade their stock. The special bloodsuckers appeared to just be regular bloodsuckers to me, well, they were gunned down the same anyway. And when I got back to turn that mission in, an E-mission began, causing everybody to huddle together in the same room, making task gathering much easier. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be able to accept tasks from my PDA, but the tab is always empty for me. I'm not sure whether I need to build an upgraded PDA or something to enable that, but whatever. I prefer working face to face. Back in Rostock, I grabbed yet more crafting recipes, the ones for various electronic devices this time. Detectors, NVGs, that kind of stuff. And I immediately used this knowledge to make the first level of NVGs. Yep, those are pretty crappy alright, but it's better than nothing. So back to science. I need to grab some artifacts in wild territory, which I do, with parkour! I also kill a load more mercs here. The place tends to be swarming with them, and I do pick up some heavy armor from them in the process, for later. Not actually realizing just how much later this meant. Expert tools can only be found in the north, but don't tell Past has all that, it'll just upset him. For now though, I also grab a suppressor for the M4 to make it even more Gucci because I like Gucci. That's why in Yantar I pay Dr. Science here 30 grand for a pair of Gucci headphones that'll protect me from the psychic death that's currently making 2 labs inaccessible. Labs that I need to go into and disable technology within if I want to keep stalking Strelok. Firstly, here in Yantar, Lab X16, which I go into quite substantially unprepared. Basically it's a spooky dark maze of a lab, filled with snorks and other mutants, all of whom spawn no-clipping ghosts that fly directly at you and deal psi damage. Interesting idea, but in my opinion, poorly executed, and deeply frustrating. This isn't helped by the fact that stalkers apparently don't know how ladders work. At one point, things got so hectic that when I died I simply left a note on the footage saying, "Excuse me?" That was the vibe in my office that morning. But many attempts later, I managed to clear this troublesome room with the help of some psi meds and, well, I knew exactly where all of the enemies were, so that helped too. So let's call that Trial 1, Snorks and Bloodsuckers. Trial 2 then is Burrers and Psi-Suckers. Honestly, considerably easier. Now we enter the room what holds the thing we're here to shut down, and once we start randomly pulling levers that are quite hard to see through night vision, things get very loud. until I pull the last lever, at which point things finally quiet down. We are, however, far from in the clear, because I've run out of ammo. Have you ever cut a burr to death? It takes quite a while. After that, I used a grenade to kill a controller, and now we're out, into the tunnels, where I'm immediately eaten by a snork. At this point, I received salvation, release from my pain in the form of a text about a red duck nearby. So I went out and saw her. What a cutie. It's a female long-tailed duck. Not as spectacular as the male, but extremely cute. Look at that little face. She was way off in the distance when I arrived, so I sat still in the snow for about an hour until she plucked up the courage to give a nice close swim by. When I got back, the mental clarity afforded by this wonderful experience allowed me to make a galaxy-brained discovery. I can just fast travel out of the pain tunnels. I don't need to deal with all this. I don't use the fast travel system in Gamma much. This is actually the first time I've used it in this playthrough. It costs some rubles and sometimes you can't do it. I have no idea what the actual conditions for its use are, and I've learned not to ask questions about how exactly things work in Gamma. Anyway, whatever, job's done. I wondered whether I would be rewarded for this, but I guess my reward is just being able to go further north and follow Strelok. I have to do a load of resupplying and turning in of tasks though now. Before I do that though, I spend maybe a little bit too much on some fabrics to make a bigger backpack with, before heading back to Rostock for resupply. On the way I got to strength level 14, at which point your carry weight modifier is almost, but not quite 1. Yeah, up to this point you're actually below 1. Really drives the point home that you're supposed to feel like a snivelling little worm at the beginning of a Gamma playthrough. But then I finally complete the trifecta of crafting. I'm making my own ammo, I've cooked a load of my mutant meat, in vodka mind you, turns out that makes it pretty good, and now I'm finally making my own meds. Would you take my drug mixes? I wouldn't, but maybe you would. First hit's free. Let's move on. In the northwest of the army warehouses, we find the gatekeeper, keeping the gate. He's going to tell us some stuff, but first we have to help him keep the gate. We meet a new faction in combat here, Monolith. They're cult weirdos that need gunning down, basically. And to be honest, I didn't help much, because I'm conserving ammo. But once they're done with, Mr. Keeper tells me that I need to go and shut down the brain Scorcher. At the time, I thought that was what I just did, but no, you see, I shut down the miracle machine in Lab X16. Now I have to go to X19 for the Scorcher. I'm fairly confident, however, that I cannot currently do that. I need to get back to work for a bit to make some rubles and maybe find some new gear and cooler artifacts to help me get stronger. In service of that goal, I actually made a better detector. I hadn't really realized there was even tiers of detector, but this one not only has a much more user-friendly display showing direction rather than simple proximity, it also has the capability to detect rarer artifacts than the base one. I'd have made it much sooner if I knew that rarer artifacts couldn't be detected by the base detector, but whatever. I think it's time for me to leave the south behind a little bit more permanently. Up north, the tasks pay better, the stashes have shinier loot in them, the air smells fresher, and there's something nicer in the sausage rolls. Wait, I got distracted thinking about Yorkshire. And most importantly, I need to gear up for the brain Scorcher, and I'm not going to do that in Cordon. Part of that gearing up involves something that I took from the military a long time ago. Remember this Gucci as hell AK? You remember that, right? Well, it's time to fix it up. Something I didn't realize about it is that this massive sight on it is a thermal. Sick. So with a good portion of my worldly possessions on my back, I chug a muscle milk and head up to Rostock. I'm basically just moving my base for crafting and storage, a couple of zones north so I don't have to keep running so far all the time. The first thing I'm going to do up here is finish off the Science Man's quests in Yantar, because I figure then he'll send me further north. But the quests aren't actually that interesting, I just run at anomalies over and over again, so instead I'll skip straight to the second thing I did, which was to make a grand mistake. I decided to go straight for Lab X19, starting with running through the Dead City and army warehouses where I'm immediately under attack by mercenaries camping the spawn. One of them has an M40 gas mask. which sort of stops my progress because now I feel like I have to go back to Rostock to repair it. But once I have though, our resistances get a nice little bump. Except for ballistic resistance. No improvement there. Which is important, but I don't know that yet, so let's carry on. Back up north and into radar. Which immediately went well. That's a chimera. Haven't met one of those yet. That's actually a lie, I have met one, but it bugged into a truck and it was very easy to kill as a result. This is the first one I've met that actually tried to kill me. And it did. Second time around, knowing about it and its Psydog friend, I managed to just take it out before it got to me, because thankfully when a mutant dies it immediately becomes a harmless ragdoll waiting to be plundered for loot. Unfortunately though, there's another two just up the road waiting to slaughter me. I was able to make use of the local electro anomalies to help me through this problem, which made me feel like quite the accomplished stalker indeed, even if it was entirely accidental. Next we fight Monolith, but just the tip, and only for a minute, because the Psystorm's coming to interrupt that combat. Afterwards I get absolutely mashed. Some of these Monolith folks are completely cracked, so getting by them takes me quite a few attempts and a fair bit of ammo too. Once I was through some of them, I did quickly confirm that I can't just immediately head north. The north kills me, sadly. Right, well then. More Monolith to fight through on our way to Lab X19 then. I sincerely doubt that I have the ammo for this now, but you never know, we'll see. But considering how difficult it is even getting to the lab, with Monolith blokes gunning me down from sentry towers in the dark, things aren't looking good. And I won't spend too much time talking about this, because when I do get by them and into the lab, I find that I have just over 10 minutes to get in and do the job. I was expecting a similar experience to X16, which is to say, mutants, but no, instead, I found humans. This causes problems. As I very briefly hinted at earlier, I'm not really built for this, having focused entirely on resisting mutants and the hostile environments of the zone. Not so much bullets. So, I gave this a good old try. A few good old tries, actually, but I'm not making it through anywhere near fast enough, and I'm typically being killed almost instantly whenever an enemy gets to take a shot at me, which is something they get to do quite often here. The other big problem is that I just don't have very much ammo, and having to be conservative down here is obviously not helping the situation. So, frustrating as it is to have to do this, I'm loading a hard save that I made before heading in here. So it looks like I need to do some additional prep. Back in Rostock then, I made the next tier of detector so that I can now find all possible anomalies, thinking hopefully some of them will give me ballistic resistance, but there's not really that much else to tell about this period of prep. I spent about 5 or 6 hours running around doing whatever convenient tasks I could whilst focusing on the anomalous study tasks, because you typically find a few extra artifacts whilst doing those. I was also looking for alternative weapons. I considered a VSS because it's got really high damage, but it's also got a magazine capacity of 10 and it's a nightmare to get enough ammo for. An AS Val would have been good, but I never found one in good condition. I was tempted though by an RPK, which I actually think would have been a really good option. The trader in Rostock sells its ammo in large quantities, but I couldn't find one with a good barrel and you need a Type D weapon kit to work on them, so sadly that's not an option. What I have managed is to make a 99% condition wrenched artifact, which really fucks up our bleeding control and radiation resistance, but it gives some other resistances in turn, including 10% ballistic. That, alongside a fireball and the testes of a long-extinct ungulate species, bring our total up to 31%. I also decided to pick up a duty trainee as a helper for the lab. Not just an additional target for Monolith to shoot at, no. A valuable squad mate. I then found an AK-12 with an underbarrel grenade launcher, which I figured was worth swapping from the Gucci AK to, because they share parts, so that was easy enough. I think I lose some handling and the magazine capacity is smaller, but as a result the magazine changes are also much faster. It's a trade-off, but it's good, I think. I popped an Elkan Spectre on it because the thermal didn't actually prove very useful in close quarters, and then I headed back to radar to have my second attempt at the lab. And you know what? It's still incredibly fucked, but it's less so. it doesn't literally feel impossible like it did before. Having plenty more ammo and not getting insta-killed quite so often really helps. And you know what? My flesh shield actually saved my life once or twice. Good job, flesh shield. I do appreciate, by the way, that this might be quite hard to watch because of the cross between the weird visual effects down here and the NVGs, but don't worry, it doesn't go on for that much longer. Unfortunately, even though this is going better, it doesn't go better enough, because before I make it to the shutdown lever, my time runs out, insta-killing me. Time for the backup plan. Something I never told you about. An artifact called the Phantom Star that I picked up whilst tasking. This little puppy gives me 1.5 minutes of invisibility. So I got as close as I could to the end of the lab and slipped that puppy into my meat pocket, abandoning my new best friend, whatever his name was, not sure, I never asked, to sprint my way through to the lever that shuts down the brain scorcher. Thankfully, this turns my vision back to normal, so now everything's bright green instead of grey, and my flashlight works as normal again, because it's been flickering annoyingly this whole time. I do, however, now have to go back through the lab, meeting those soldiers that I previously snuck past. But without an instant death timer in the corner of the screen, this is a much more pleasant experience. I also got to do a load of looting on the way back, including my good friend. Let me just read the dog tags. Zhurakovsky. Good to put a name to the face, even if the face is face down and dead. Anyway, fat with loot, including a nice, much more protective medium helmet and a Mark 47 Mutant, we waddle back out of the lab and immediately fast travel back to the safety of Rostock. Which is kind of lame, but I need to dump a load of loot and prepare my fragile body for Pripyat and beyond. Where we'll go in a future video, because yes, I'm deciding to call this here and planning to venture forth in the future, discovering what fresh horrors await me in the north, and continuing to advance our gear to the highest levels available in the game. But I've recorded 50 hours of this so far, and I really don't want to force myself to keep going and just end up burning out on the game. I'll enjoy it a lot more after a bit of a break to do some other projects. What is it they say? Distance makes the heart fonder? Something like that, you get the point. Also, this script is already 10,000 words long, and I keep telling myself that I need to work on shorter projects for my own and my editor's mental health. So that's gone well, hasn't it? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, then subscribe to the channel, like the video, you know the drill. But whatever you do, remain indoors. There's chimera out there. Don't worry, I'll take some nice pictures of them for you. It's okay for me to be outdoors, trust me, but you should remain indoors, watching my videos. Until next time, goodbye.